All right. Welcome again to the Masterclass session. I am your host, Courneen, host of My Friend in HR. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in. You guys asked for it, and here we are. We did our Masterclass last December. It was an overwhelming success. It was so successful, in fact, that we could not get to all the questions. And one of the things that came up consistently throughout the entire session was the need and hunger to know more about personal branding. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring that to you. We're going to bring the masterclass back because they were excited to get on this topic, because this is something that everybody on this panel is excited about and passionate about, because whether or not you take action, you have a personal brand. So we're going to get right into it. Let me bring my panelists in. First panelist is Qiara Suggs. How you doing, Qiara?
Hi, good afternoon. Happy Friday.
Glad to have you back. You and I have so many conversations about this topic. You are so passionate about authentic presentation, and I cannot wait to get fed by some of the stuff that you're going to give us today. So we're going to get to that shortly. Yes, the next person is going to be Alejandra Hernandez-Villegas. Welcome back. How are you, my dear?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here and give you guys a bit more insight on how to present your most authentic self.
Excellent. And the cool thing about it is that Alejandra will also be able to give us the context, again, coming from a recruiting leader perspective, about like how you show up and then what she sees as a recruiting leader in her field. The next person, man, my brother from another mother, Sean Barnes. How are you, sir?
Always a pleasure. I am so pumped and excited for today. I got really pumped last time and was disappointed that we shut it off so soon because there were so many questions. So I'm really glad that you had a chance to spin up another one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for showing up, Sean. And let me tell you, if there's a person who believes in presenting and taking control of your authentic brand, it is Mr. Wolf himself, Sean Barnes. So we're definitely going to dive into that. And last and not least, the best from the West, Mr. Courneen. How are you doing, brother?
I'm wonderful. You know, I'm in a good mood. I got my party shirt on. I got a bunch of cool people to hang out with. I'm ready.
This dude got his sexy tan going, so I'm a little bit jealous. I mean, I got the natural tan, but you have the one you had to pay for. So there you go. You actually had to go to a location and get that tan. So that is awesome. I'm jealous. I'm a little bit jealous.
That's right. I mean, I live in Orange County. It's a lot of people can be jealous of the beautiful sun we have out here.
Yeah, no, it's great. So look, first of all, guys, I know this is a busy time in most HR departments. Sean, you've been traveling all over the place, but I love the fact that you guys fought your schedules and you were able to do this to bring this information to the My Friend in HR community. So we're not gonna delay it. Let's jump right into it. So I want to start with a kind of a thesis, because we use the term personal brand so often, and it's kind of overused sometimes. And so for each of you, like when you say personal brand, and I'm going to start with Qiara, when we say personal brand, what does that mean to you?
To me, personal brand is before you open your mouth, people recognize who you are authentically, how your interactions are, how you make people feel, and the sort of the lasting impression that you have with other people.
Excellent. Chris?
You know, it's interesting. Sometimes in the workplace, this gets used in a negative way, and we call it perception, about how people perceive you. And I think in such a powerful, positive way, you can think of that as your brand. It is kind of what people think and believe they know of and about you when you're not in the room, and when they see you, the feeling and the reaction that they have, but also kind of how you present yourself and the choices that you make on how you present yourself to the world.
Absolutely. Sean, what's your take on personal brand when you hear that?
I think a lot of people are still exploring and trying to figure out what this means. And far too many are just leaning into, oh, I have to create content at scale. And yes, visibility is a component, but ultimately, if we distill brand all the way down, it is simply association. What are you known for? What do people say about you when you're not in the room? And so in order to create the associations that we want, we have to be intentional about understanding who we are, understanding where we're going, and then create the conditions in person and online so that whenever you do show up in a room full of strangers, before your name is even said, people know who you are and what you're about.
Excellent. Alejandra, what are your thoughts?
So I think it's a blend of what everyone just shared. From my experience, it's been what people consistently get from you, both when they're in front of you and, like to Sean's point, when you're not in the room. It's not about changing who you are, but definitely being a bit more wise on who it is that you amplify, what pieces it is that you share with others, when you are letting them in, and letting them know how you show up, both when you're there physically and when you're not, and when you're giving them your word on something.
Great. All right. Thank you all. So Qiara, I wanted you to start us off with this conversation because one of the things that you and I have talked about off camera was the need for authenticity. And it's about the need, and the need to make sure you show up as who you really are, or who you intend to portray. And sometimes people get this wrong. So kind of a hybrid question. When we talk about authenticity, what does that really mean? Why is that important? And where do people miss the boat on that?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I love this topic, and I want to pull the string through with what everyone just mentioned, because I firmly believe that your personal brand speaks about who you are before you open your mouth. It really is. And why does this matter? It's because visibility is not just what you say, and it's not just about how you show up on social media. It's not this curated image. I think Ali just mentioned authenticity, and I know I'd love to hear everybody else's opinion, but the truth is your brand is already being built before you even walk into a room. It is how consistent you are. From a professional perspective, it's about how you deliver, your credibility, all of those different things. And I think the challenge that people have when we say authenticity is often a buzzword. And so when I think of authenticity, it's about alignment and who you are, your values, who you say you are, how you adjust to your audience. But when I say that, I'm not at all suggesting that you should shift who you are authentically. It's just about awareness on how you're engaging with the audience across the room. I think authenticity is often oversimplified. And so it's not just about being yourself. It's about ensuring that you deliver in some level of consistency. I'm sure a lot of people have read or listened to podcasts from Brene Brown, but she has this quote where she says, authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every single day. And why is that important? It's because you don't necessarily have to show up exactly the same way in every room. It's just about making sure that the core of who you are doesn't change, right? You're not, I can't wait until we talk about social media, because social media, you sort of see the perfect side of people, and you often miss the human side. And to me, there's a gap in authenticity there. But this authenticity to me is about how you are aligning your values, how you treat people, honesty, how people engage with you in a way that is truly meaningful and consistent in every single interaction. So I don't know if you guys want to challenge that, but I think that's my foundation of being authentic in who I am and consistent through every interaction, through every experience.
Now, real quick, because I know Sean's going to want to jump in on this, but one of the things I want to make sure people understand is we're intentionally not jumping into LinkedIn, right? We're going to talk about LinkedIn. We will talk about social media. We'll talk about presenting yourself, your online presence. But we're starting at the foundation in terms of like making sure that what you build is what you intend to build. And again, being authentic. So anyway, I'll take a step back. Sean, go for it. I can see you chomping at the bit. Let's do it.
I know. I'm so excited. So yesterday we actually had another one of our influential executive courses, and one of the attendees, he started speaking up about some content that he had posted that was pretty humorous and borderline sophomoric in nature. And it really kind of called back onto the younger version of himself and the type of comedy that he appreciated. He posted it, and a little bit later, he had mentioned that his wife came up to him and said, "Hey, is that really on brand for you?" And so I think what this speaks to for me is he did take it down, but we have to be intentional, to Qiara's point, of what is the brand that we are curating? What do we want to be known for? That was a former version of himself. He was being genuine. He was being true to that former version. But as we evolve, as we move through the seasons of our life, we have to be intentional about the brand that we're creating. And again, brand is just association. Do you want to be associated with childish humor, or do you want to be associated with professionalism and executive presence? So we always have to be aware of the content that we're creating, also how we show up at events, at gatherings, whether it's friends and family or a Gartner conference, it doesn't matter, but you want continuity and consistency with how you show up in every aspect of your life. Yes, be genuine and true to who you are and be the best version of yourself.
Excellent. I appreciate that, Sean. Does anyone else want to jump in on that?
I wanted to share one thought. It's interesting because, I have been in organizations where like this was almost a taboo topic, this idea of your own brand, because you are, a representative of the company to some extent, but largely it is about the company more than it is yourself. And I don't necessarily disbelieve that in a lot of settings, but I think what people miss and what we're trying to get at is brand doesn't mean something fancy. Your consistency with following up when you say you will, your ability as a leader to create an environment where people want to come and talk to you, your, Sean described how you show up to places. Are you really casual, guy in a Hawaiian shirt, or are you really formal? Well, that sets a tone. I think of even examples where I've told my team I intentionally, in my role, have taken a position that is a little more casual on how I present myself, because I want to be able to walk through a warehouse and have a conversation with a warehouse employee. That is just part of who I am and what I want people to know me about and know of me. And part of, I think, what people get lost in this conversation is this is about all of the little actions that you take that develop an impression about you, and everything that you do, so long as you are thoughtful about it, matters. And sometimes part of your brand isn't great in one setting and it is in another. And so the other reality that we all face is there is some amount of intentionality that you have to have in terms of how you present yourself. How I show up in a group of friends is typically pretty different than how I show up with my family, which might be different than how I show up at work. And those differences are examples of those choices. And I like the idea of consistency and intentionality. And so, this idea sometimes feels like a really big topic, or we're only talking about things online, or we're only talking about people who are putting themselves before others, but that's really not the point. The point is how you present yourself and the perception of you. That is all part of your brand. And it's not this kind of weird separate topic that only some people need to think about. Everyone should be thinking about this because everybody has it.
All right, cool. No, thank you for that. I mean, I think what we want to take away from this is, before you even start posting content, before you start your first LinkedIn post or Instagram post or YouTube video, whatever it is, you really need to think about what it is you want people to say about you when you're in the room and out of the room, and making sure you're being authentic to themselves. Because I think part of that is when you're authentic, whatever you decide to put out there, when you get ready to put your LinkedIn posts out there, first of all, people who know you will be like, that don't sound like Chris. And then they'll probably accuse you of like using ChatGPT or whatever, but they'll say that. And I do, I'll be first one to admit, I use a lot of AI in some of my stuff to help, organize my thoughts, create certain imagery and things like that. But people who know me says, oh no, that's still Jasani. Trust me, he's quirky like that. And so I think it's really, really important to make sure that regardless of what you do or how you do it or your platform, that you are true to yourself. And so Rakib Hassan has how do I develop my brand on LinkedIn? Rakib, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk specifically about LinkedIn in just a moment after we get done with this foundation. So yeah, just stay tuned. We got you covered, brother. So when you think about people, when people actually have the courage to start posting, they say, I'm gonna start my brand, and I'm gonna pick LinkedIn because all of us are on LinkedIn. Where have you seen people go wrong in terms of their brand? And I'll start with you, Sean.
I knew you were gonna pick on me. Oh man.
Totally.
Okay, here we go. All right. I believe it's extremely important to be able to build and amplify your personal brand. And the easiest way to do that is on LinkedIn. Where I see people going wrong is thinking that they have to create as much volume of content as possible. And what's the best way to do that? AI. Go to ChatGPT, go to Claude, create a viral LinkedIn post for me, click post. The problem is the more you do that, the more your differentiator, the more your voice is lost. Because these AI tools, all they are doing is pulling on this corpus of knowledge and trying to figure out what actually resonates, what is going to go the most viral, but it's not true to you. Just like Qiara was talking about, you have to stay true to yourself. So yes, use these AI tools to amplify your voice, not replace your voice. And I see far too many people that they have AI create everything for them. And yes, you can tell that it's still them kind of behind it, but maybe I'm just old school, old fashioned, but I try to do as much as possible that is genuinely and organically us first, and then leverage AI to maximize that going forward. So leverage it to maximize, not replace your voice.
Absolutely love it. So hopefully I'm gonna be a contrarian here and create a little disruption. So Chris, you are a major proponent of utilizing AI. So considering all that Sean has just said, agree, disagree, or do you just have a different vantage point?
It's so funny when you talk about brand. Like if I'm at a conference, my brand, I think, has become I'm the AI guy in many circumstances. And I have thought long and hard about why. Because like, well, I could, there's so much more to the work that I do and that we do outside of AI. And part of it is the choices that have been made, by myself about where to focus and all those things. But I will tell you that I agree with Sean. I think this comes down to a question of tactics. I think there are maybe best practices is overly formulaic. But yes, there's a lot of AI slop out in the world. And it is obvious, I think, when someone is contributing something that is really not authentically them. I am not maybe the first person to be quite as critical of someone who is using AI, but I am also probably not the first person to hang on every word that person says either. I think there is balance, and I think as an amplifier, the variety of tools that are at our fingertips are pretty impressive and pretty useful. And I think, if you aren't using those tools, as Sean said, to amplify your voice or significantly improve your productivity, I think you're in trouble. I think the problem that people have with AI, particularly in a space like LinkedIn or others, is they're only using it to help them create copy. I mean, a more powerful use of AI is tying Claude Cowork to a Chrome extension and having Claude build you a personal website in 15 minutes that you can do through, a Wix page or a Squarespace page or anything like that. And if I was going to tell someone, use this tool to help amplify the version of you want to live online, I'm probably telling you to use the tool to do that, even though you don't know how to program a website, before I'm telling you to use it to write your next LinkedIn post.
Got you. So I do want to get Alejandra's perspective, because Ali, again, you know, she's a talent acquisition leader. And so again, she goes to LinkedIn, she goes to these social media pages to source for key roles. So Alejandra, when you go to someone's LinkedIn page for a particular, you're recruiting for a position, and you see that they have used AI to help with their content, or, you know, or they have an AI image, you could tell their picture is AI. Does that help or hurt in terms of, you know, them being a viable candidate?
So I think there's a very fine line to, are they using it, to Sean's point and everybody else who's kind of voiced in, to amplify, to elevate maybe some concepts or some parts of themselves, or are they using it because they don't know what they're talking about? And in that case, you know, if the picture of AI, you know, I can tell that you didn't see that it added like a sixth finger to your hand or gave you an extra ear, then you definitely didn't pay attention to detail, and the bullet point on your resume makes you just contradicted yourself. But no, in all seriousness, I don't discount anyone for using AI to really, really highlight some of their wins. Sometimes it's hard to talk about yourself, and sometimes you do need a bit more support on how to translate that maybe to an industry you're trying to branch into. Maybe you're not so familiar with the day-to-day terminology and, you know, that specific industry's jargon. And so maybe you do need AI to kind of help connect the gaps or the dots between one industry and another. That's where AI can definitely play a factor, because the foundational knowledge of someone's experience is there. They just need a little bit of support on how to give them a better perspective or shift them in an angle when they're looking to maybe make a career move. So I think it's all about how they're using it. Are they being thoughtful? And I guess the really theme that we've all kind of said time and time, are they being intentional with how they're using it?
Okay. So Qiara, I do want to ask this question before we move on to some more of the tactical, like actually building the brand. How did you determine what your brand was when you decided you wanted to put yourself out there? How did you do that self-exploration to determine, okay, I want to come as my authentic self, I'm going to come as the real Qiara? How did you determine what that was?
Okay, well, you asked the right question, and I'm just going to be a little vulnerable in this space, because I'll have to tell you, and hopefully you all can relate to this. There was a season in my life where I sort of sat around and waited for someone to help me define my brand. In fact, I'll call it outsourcing. So I found myself leaning on other things, insert, you know, an attachment to organizations or things of that nature. And frankly, I defined my brand around those things. And believe it or not, COVID was sort of it was a blessing for me in that I sort of hit a fork in the road where I challenged myself to elevate who I was and how I was showing up in the professional world, in the community, and really for my own sake. So I stopped letting others write my story, letting others define my brand. And I took the pen and I started authoring who I was with intentionality. And believe it or not, that was very hard. When you find yourself attached to something that sort of defines who you are, your values, it's hard to differentiate and to separate from whatever it is, a brand that is not your human brand. And so I got intentional. I got deliberate about making sure that I understood who I was innately. I got intentional about defining what value I was bringing to the outside world. And I spent some time reading books, understanding. So I moved away from these shiny objects, this curated image, and then I started working on myself first. So it was about figuring out, who do I stand for? Who am I innately? How can I determine how badass I am? Sorry for the language, but sometimes you have to believe in yourself. You have to pour into yourself so that someone else doesn't control your path. And I've learned that no one can believe in you until you believe in yourself. And that's what you may see now as you interact with me, be it on social media, in a one-on-one conversation, or when I have a platform to communicate with people. It's I like to say that my brand and what you see now is manifestation in real time. And so I think back to how I was growing up, and my mom always taught me to dress the part that you want to be, not the part that you're in right now. And so and I think that there's a physical component of who your brand is, but there's this innate character that you carry when you're interacting with people. And so that's what it started with me questioning, like, Qiara, what are you doing? Like, why are you attaching yourself to something that may not necessarily be with you long term? Figure out who you are innately, and then capitalize on that so that you can believe in yourself and exploit that in every single interaction that you have.
Excellent. So, Sean, go ahead. You got something to add. Go for it, sir.
I do. And here's the thing. As Qiara was talking, I started flashing back to a former life of mine. Obviously, most of you know I was with 9 Energy Service for over a decade, and IT and HR and all the corporate functions. And it was about 5 years ago that I really started to grapple with, how do I break my identity from 9? Obviously, I was all in and an advocate and a supporter for what we were doing for the company, but I also knew that I was meant for more. And so what I had to end up doing is gradually creating some separation. And for me, that came in the form of starting a YouTube channel, The Way of the Wolf, and gradually starting to establish Sean Barnes, the executive, not Sean Barnes at 9. Far too many executives just pour their life and heart and soul and energy into the company that they work for, and they accomplish incredible things in the process, but they also miss out on this beautiful opportunity to start to create a little bit of separation. And the only way for you to truly step into being that keynote speaker, being that board member, having increased optionality in life, is to start to create a little bit of separation. And it has to start off slow and gradual. And as you start creating that separation and you are trying to find your voice, you're going to explore a lot of different things. Just like Qiara mentioned, the best analogy that I can use is it's like focusing a lens on a camera. It's blurry at first. You don't know what you're trying to focus on. But the more time you go down that path, the more you realize what your purpose is, what you want to be known for, and it becomes crystal clear on what the next steps are.
Wow. Wow. I don't know. I don't know which one hit me harder, Qiara's or Sean's. I mean, I will tell you very, very quickly again, and I love the fact that this group feels comfortably vulnerable, not only with each other, but with the community. Like I myself, I was what you would call a fraud for a really, really long time. And there's no other word for it. So if you go to some of my early LinkedIn stuff, you will see Sean, SHAWN, Sean. And I molded myself to something that I thought was more palatable in terms of the corporate world, right? So my name is Jasani. It's spelled, it has a unique spelling. And, I modified that to make folks, to what I thought folks wanted to make to feel more comfortable. No one ever told me to change my name. No one ever said it, but it was just this implied pressure to conform and assimilate. And some people may say, well, it's just your name, because some people do it all the time. But a mentor of mine told me, they said, listen, you're a mama's boy, right? Because you always talk about being a mama's boy. I said, yes, I am. I'm a mama's boy. It says, your name is the first gift your mama gave you. And each time you let somebody call you by something other than your name, you are not necessarily showing that gift the respect it deserves. But for the longest time, I went by Sean Courneen. And like I said, I mean, you can go to some other stuff and people like, I noticed on one of your things you went by Sean. Did you become Muslim and you changed your name to more of a ethnic sounding name? I was like, no, not Muslim. I eat my pork. It's delicious. But no. And when I got that advice, it snapped. I said, oh my God, in my pursuit to climb that corporate ladder, I wasn't bringing my authentic self. And to kind of continue along the path that Qiara was saying, is that when you find that path that is truly who you were meant to be, who you were uniquely designed to be, it is so freeing because you're like, here I am, world, love it or leave it. This is what we're going to do. And this is what I have to give to the world. And so I challenge everybody, whether it's you're maybe embarrassed about your background. Maybe you come from very humble beginnings, a rural background. Maybe you come from a home situation that's not the best and you've had to overcome that. Or maybe, you don't have the Ivy League education that your peers have. But whatever that is, when you start building your personal brand, put a lot of thought, as Sean and Qiara have said, into what is it that you want the world to know about you. And I'll get off that with them. That might be a separate LinkedIn event. We do have a quick question, and I'm gonna put this to Chris, because Chris sent us an email. We were preparing for this. We were preparing for everybody's laughing because we know the email he sent. We were talking about like oversharing. So we have a question from, it says, for brand purposes, where does authenticity end and oversharing begin? And so, Chris, if you can quickly hit on this real quick.
Yeah, and this is related to maybe this asterisk that I was thinking of while you guys were talking, particularly as it relates to your brand and your employers. So I'll tell you a tactic I use, which is, if I wouldn't write it to my CEO, I'm probably not going to post it on LinkedIn. And it's a fine starting point that I have used to help focus kind of what content I'm willing to share and not willing to share, but also how I choose to share it. I'll tell you, I didn't have a LinkedIn until I started in HR. And one of the things that I did as I was moving into HR and knew all these other eyeballs were going to be on me is I started thinking about how I was presented in ways outside of what was happening within the four walls of our workspace. And so if there were things online that didn't present in a way that I was willing to present within the four walls of my workplace, I made sure that those things weren't presented anymore. And that was a really tactical, almost narrow kind of frame of focus that I had, because I was also earlier in my career. And the asterisk that I think about from everything that was just shared and how powerful it was is there. It's easy to say some of these things, or at least it might sound easy to say some of these things, because we all sit in like the most senior seat within our organization. But go down to someone early in their career or mid-career, all of these things are applicable. And the only advice I would give as you're navigating this is you also have to have the reality of your employer in mind. Some employers are not going to like you posting anything on LinkedIn. Other employers don't care. Some employers have policies about these things. I had a very interesting conversation with a friend who works in the inclusion and belonging space, and was reflecting on a conversation that he had to have with some folks internally about things being posted on LinkedIn. And we had a deep conversation about, what do you feel is right for you personally versus what is right for the company? And at some point, you're going to have to make a choice that is true and authentic to yourself about what to do. And I think those are things that you have to consider. The reality is, unless you own your own business, you do have the backdrop of making sure that what you're doing is not going to run afoul with kind of the cultural expectations around your employer. But my starting point for anything I post is if I don't want it within my four walls, it doesn't belong on LinkedIn. If I wouldn't say it to my CEO, I probably don't need to say it on LinkedIn, because everybody can possibly see that. It is not a private space. And I treat LinkedIn like work. I don't treat it like Facebook, which I also don't have. I deleted it right when I got in.
All right. No, and you know what? You guys bring up some good points in terms of that, because again, most, we're all leaders of our organizations, and we are representatives of our organization, regardless of what we're posting. It doesn't matter where it is. It could be on Facebook, on our personal account. It could be on LinkedIn. It could be on Instagram or TikTok. And the higher up you go into an organization, the more that it matters that you're cautious about what you post and what you choose to comment on. And some people can listen to that and say, well, then I'm not being authentic because I'm dancing to the tune. And I guess my comment to that is there is a balance in terms of when you work for someone else. When someone else is giving you a paycheck, there is a bit of onus to understand that depending on your role, your words can impact the reputation of your company. Where it's almost like when I was in the Army, they would tell you if there was some kind of a protest or whatever the case was, before we ended formation, they would say, now don't let me catch you on CNN out there in uniform, because as a member of the military, like, yes, you're an American citizen, you have rights, you have First Amendment rights, but you just don't want to be seen in certain venues and areas because of what it is you do for a living. So for any professional out there, especially if you're an executive, you have to weigh that. You have to be careful in terms of, like, are you okay with this being on your CEO's desk? Are you okay with if this showed up on CNN or the nightly news and saying, oh, Chris Courneen posted this? Are you okay with that? And give that level of consideration and not just willy-nilly post anything. I do want to move on to some more some tactical things. So what we want to take away from this first part of the conversation is, first, as Qiara said, authenticity is key, right? Go into yourself and figure out what that looks like before you start posting. As Sean said earlier, use AI in a measurable sense. It's a tool, but it is not meant to replace your voice, because people can tell, and you lose credibility if you're just spitting out, as Chris said, AI slop. People can tell. And as Chris was just saying, be professional and make sure that what you share is what you intend to share, and you're cautious of that. So now let's talk about social media, right? And I want to talk about, so somebody's listening to this, they're like, okay, cool, I'm going to be my authentic self. Qiara pumped me up. Sean has convinced me never to use AI ever again because it's evil. I know that's not what you said exactly, but so that's kind of true. But anyway, I'm ready to start posting. I'm ready to start going out there. Now, as a professional, there's multiple answers for this, and I'll start with Alejandra. Where should a person who wants to establish a professional brand start? Should they, in terms of opportunities and getting roles later, is LinkedIn the holy grail of it all?
So obviously the first things, let me take a step back. Personal experience, right? Many times we think that hard work will speak loud enough for the next opportunity, and it's not. It's not all that it takes. I've seen more traction when you have a stronger network, when you have advocates, when you have sponsors and mentors who believe in your brand and know that by them putting their name behind your name, you're not going to let them down, right? And so I think that that's what really needs to happen first. How do you want to be presented? How do you want to show up so that when you do create a LinkedIn, there's consistency in what people know about you. There's consistency in the resume that you're sending to companies, or that you're sending to someone that you know at that company, so that they can refer you to the recruiter. social media, it can be a bit confusing. You can definitely either dilute your brand or it can accelerate it, specifically when it comes to LinkedIn. Your digital presence should definitely, it shouldn't confuse your story. However, or whatever role it is that you're looking to obtain, it should add credibility to it. So for me, the first step would be to, again, establish your brand, establish a network that believes in the brand, and then go out and display that through a resume and a LinkedIn that is consistent with the narrative you want to put out there.
Gotcha. All right. So we have a question here. Miriam. So she says, how do you continue to build an authentic personal brand with your environment when your environment doesn't necessarily encourage individual visibility? Oh, tough question. All right. And with expectations of closely being tying closely with the organization's identity. Miriam, I love how you called me out on that. That was great. I mean, look, we're going to be honest here, right? My company pays me. And it's one of those things where there is a loyalty to your organization. Now, I personally believe that most of us have some level of moral compass, and we're not trying to go out there and intentionally be, disruptive and say things that are contrary to most of our company's brands. And I think as long as you do that and you're open about what you're doing, you'll be okay. I'm very open about my personal brand. I'm very open about what it is I post. Hell, I even my company's ethics and compliance department has access to my podcast episodes because I am a VP of HR and I can say some things that could put my organization at risk. So I have to take that responsibility seriously whenever I post content. But I think the biggest thing is figure out what it is you want to talk about, be open with your employer about it. Your employer will either be cool with it or not cool, or they can be passive aggressive about it. But if your company does have an issue with it, or they have policies against being, having a very outspoken brand, then you have a personal decision to make. Like, how passionate are you about that? And are you at the stage of your career where you can say, all right, well, you're lost, right? I think it's just one of those things you have to figure out where you are in that journey, but just be true to yourself regardless of which path that is.
Jasani, can I just add to that really quickly?
Sure.
So I also just want to add, the further you go up in an organization, the further exposure that you have. And I have this philosophy that you're on stage at all times. So what does that mean? Whatever you put out there, regardless if you want to or not, you are always going to be affiliated with your organization, with other organizations. And so you get to a point where sometimes you have to filter what you put out there. As we were talking earlier about just how to engage on social media, one of the biggest turnoffs that I have in LinkedIn or you insert social media platform is when politics get mixed into who the person is, maybe at work, or who you thought they were kind of as an individual. That's like a risky space. So I would just say you have to recognize that whatever you put out there, you're representing not only your own views, but just innately, you are representing your organization unintentionally based on what you put in the atmosphere. So I would just be thoughtful and careful. The one thing I would just say, and this double downs on what Jasani says, hopefully you're working for an organization that aligns to your values, right? And so if you start to see a conflict where maybe your organization believes something, maybe they are outwardly open about one thing and there's a sort of a difference in your opinion, you might just want to self-reflect to see if that is the right organization. I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to leave your organization. It's just more awareness. When you work for an organization, ideally your values align, but if you're passionate about engaging on a social media platform, know that there's always going to be risk associated.
I would also like to chime in here. This is something that I grappled with a good bit. There were a number of conversations where I would have to have a boss with my C-level executive that I reported to. And the question came up, well, when are you recording your podcast? Well, what's going on? People are asking questions. And my response back was always obviously cordial and polite, but it was usually a question of, well, first of all, I was highlighting, I was always recording my content and scheduling on the weekend, so non-working hours. The other question that I would always pose is, how are my teams performing? Well, they're doing well. Cool. Are they performing better than they have in the history of the company? Well, yes. Okay. So we have a lot of executives that like to go fishing and hunting on the weekends. I like to have a podcast focused on leadership and building strong teams. Is it completely detrimental that I have this hobby related to just teaching leadership and business skills? Well, no, I guess it's okay. But to Jasani's point, you have to be transparent. You have to have those conversations. First and foremost, you have to perform at a very high level within your organization. If you or your team are slipping and they are not performing as expected, I would highly discourage you going out spending time building your personal brand and creating content. You have to deliver first and then do this on the side. And when you do that, you do mitigate the risk. Obviously, if you work for large and or publicly traded companies, you are associated to the company. Even if your podcast or your channel is completely separate, people know who you are. If you're the head of HR for a publicly traded organization, people can piece it together. So it is something to be cognizant of, but your top priority has to be your employer that is paying your salary. Everything else has to happen on the side.
Wow. Look at that. Truth bombs left and right. I feel like I need to wear a helmet. Look, and look, folks, what we're saying is, we're not saying, and I saw a comment earlier about fear and not being able to be authentic. It's not about that, but you got to know where you work. There are companies where this is frowned upon. And if it's in your spirit to create your personal brand, if it is in your spirit to go out on your own and have this voice, then, as Qiara said, it's really important to make sure you work for an organization that aligns with your values and that are okay with that. Because if you don't, you'll be walking on eggshells. There will always be this passive aggressive, hey, I saw you online, blah, 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 blah. And it's just one of those things, trust me, you just don't want to deal with, because it's one of those, it's something that you're just kind of like, seriously? I'm not saying anything different. I'm not saying anything wrong. And your brain starts telling yourself a narrative and a story, and next thing you know, animosity builds up, and then no one's happy. But Sean says something that's so important. I do spend a lot of time on the weekends building my content. I have a very supportive wife. She lets me hide up in my lab, and I work on all of my content. People say, dude, you post every other day. How do you do it? It's because I don't have Saturdays. But he's right. If you are not performing, or your the teams that you lead are not performing, that is the first thing your employer is going to look at. Well, if you wasn't posting on LinkedIn all day, maybe you'd be performing okay. Because as a manager, I would think that I'd be looking for reasons why the team isn't performing. So just keep that in mind. And if you are at a point where your performance is not where it needs to be, and it's not, I would caution going hardcore into your brand. Get your foundation straight first. Also, if you're trying to talk about leadership or things like that, it's kind of hard to take advice from somebody whose world is on fire as well, because we're looking for clarity and things like that. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Alejandra, this is for you, but like any of you can answer this. Because sometimes we talk about brand and it's like, oh, I'm trying to create a brand, but your brand exists based on whatever exists about you in the world, including the internet. So how often, Alejandra, are you Google searching a name of a candidate that's applying, or your team? Because I know my answer. I want to hear yours.
We'd like to admit. No, if someone isn't on LinkedIn, or I look up someone and it doesn't align with what they submitted, it's a red flag. And then I'm like, okay, what's up on Google? right? Because LinkedIn's always the first avenue. LinkedIn is basically an online resume. So probably every single candidate gets looked up on LinkedIn for sure, at least. Outside of that, definitely the higher up you go, the more senior that you're going to be in the company. To everyone's point in the most recent parts of the discussion, you're just higher profile, you're higher radar, and the role that you're coming in to take carries a bit more weight than if you were maybe an entry-level junior contributor, where your name carries maybe a bit more weight because of the experience and the clients and what you're going to be representing the company at. So yeah, we absolutely do it.
And this is the point, I think, of some of what we are discussing, because sometimes the brand can be, oh, I want to go create content, and Sean and Qiara are really clear. That's not necessarily what brand means. It's also just what exists about you. And to Kiara's point, if you're always on stage, Google.com is a stage. It's a big one. And I think sometimes folks lose that. And I might even add to what Alejandra said. I don't think it's even just higher ups. Like, I have commissioned salespeople that use these platforms to advertise products or to advertise our company, and how you behave on that platform that you were also trying to advertise our company can also affect how your customers view you. So if you are in a sales role, this is equally important for you. Your brand as a sales rep is important, because that is how your customers see you. And to Qiara's point, I tell people all the time, can you talk about, politics and religion at work? Sure. Do I recommend it? Never. The same thing's true on LinkedIn. And because think about, again, even if you're in that sales role, that person you're selling to might feel differently than you. And that, as a leader, what you say as a representative of your company impacts the company. And it's not a secret. I have hiring managers in my organization that will Google search you before they hire you, because they exist in every organization. And so as I think about kind of online brand and social media presence and all that, just right now, go Google search your name and go see what comes up. And then you might decide whether or not you like that or don't like that. And if you don't like what you see, you might need to take some steps to get that under control. Because as you put yourself out there and you're looking to move up in your career, LinkedIn, I agree. I'm going to your LinkedIn first. And then I'm probably going to just search your name. And I have seen it cost people jobs. I've seen it cost people promotions. I have seen all kinds of silly things online that people go, ooh, I don't want that reflecting on our organization. Or I have heard horror stories, and some of it is so bad it makes the news, about things that people do online that then impacts them in their workplace. Because also at the end of the day, this is my HR hat for everybody. Like, this idea of, like, I can't be my authentic self. At some point, work is work. And you should authentically represent the portions of yourself you are willing to share. But if you are authentically a jerk, I'm going to tell you, you probably don't want to be your authentic self at work. And it is what it is. Right. So you have to make choices, and ultimately, if the things that you are doing online are also potentially creating a hostile environment at work, well, all of a sudden what you did online at 6:00 on a Saturday afternoon, it can spill into work. And there's plenty of legal precedent for that. And so I do think there is this element of, unless you're self-employed, as many people have said, you are going to be held accountable because you're always on stage. I think it's such a good metaphor. But just go Google search yourself and see what comes up. And if you don't like it, then step one is go clean up what happens when people search your name.
Yeah.
For extra funsies, I had to just go ahead and search all of our names, and Chris dominates Google search. So all of you that are in the chat or watching this, go Google search all of us. And Chris, like, kudos to you, because you dominate Google.
You know what? I call personal SEO. I did this when I walked into HR. I was like, hey, wait a minute. HR people are held to a different standard. I can't be viewed as an unbiased participant in this organization unless Every version. I promise you, I know employees look me up too. So you're going to see what I want you to see. And I'm going to control that because I represent my company. I'm through and through my company. I love this place so much. It's ridiculous. And I am not going to also put my company in that position because I'm in the number one seat. And I know what I do and what I say is going to impact how people look at the company. But yeah, there are tools. If you don't know how to clean up what you find and don't like, you got to decide how much you love your social media for the love of everything. If it's not private, what you post on it is public. It counts. But it costs me, I don't know, $200 a year to have a personal website. That really helps. And then if you don't know how to manage SEO, ChatGPT or Claude can tell you how to manage SEO pretty well. And you can now start to control what people see about you. It goes back to what I think Sean and Qiara said in the beginning. It's intentionality. And if you are intentional about how you show up in these spaces, that's your brand. And so you got to be careful, even on Saturday at 6 p.m., that some of the stuff you do online might count.
Yep.
Intentionality and AI tools. That's what I'm hearing from Chris.
So we're in the spot that I was afraid. I was worried that we were going to have so much content and so much discussion that we're going to get down to the last few minutes. Sean warned me. I didn't believe him. So that's my fault. So we're going to blaze through just a couple of questions I definitely want to give. I'm going to assign them specifically to certain people. But I want to get this through. So going to Sean. What is the biggest difference if I'm a outgoing person and I want to be a personality and I want to go out there and like kind of like what I do now versus a subject matter expert, a technical person who wants to be known for their technical expertise? What are a couple of quick things you would recommend to somebody to start building their online presence with those differences?
I'm so fortunate that I get to speak at a lot of CIO and CISO events that are obviously full of technical experts. And I think it's important for us to stay true to who we are. And one of the most incredible ways to build your brand is just to create as much value as possible. You don't have to be bubbly and extroverted and excited and outgoing. Just lean into providing value. Share that technical expertise. Share the lessons that you have learned with as many people as possible. And when you do that, the right people are going to start to coalesce around you. The right people are going to start following you. And yes, you're probably going to have to tweak and refine your messaging to go beyond just the tech specs and understand how to communicate to the broader audience. But stay true to who you are, lean into just providing maximal value. And I think that is the best way for technical experts to build a strong brand.
Excellent. Another quick question. This one will go to Qiara. Qiara, if for somebody who's trying to build their LinkedIn presence, how often do they need to post? Do they need to post every single day?
I would say if you have the time, feel free to do that. I think you have to be strategic about what you put out on LinkedIn. But here's the thing, you have to have a starting point. And so I would just say, you've got to understand who your audience is. Don't just post for post's sake. You need to know who you are first, so that when you are posting, it aligns to your brand and what you're intending. And then I see a question about like building your engagement at an executive level. Recognize if you want to engage at an executive level, communicate on topics that are at an executive level or a leadership level. Insert wherever you're trying to go. And then the last thing I would say is when you post, make sure that you use that platform to highlight. So if you're speaking somewhere, take pictures and then give people content, generate conversation. You don't always have to lead the conversation and own the conversation. Build a post that will generate dialogue that will not only fuel you, but also fuel the extended LinkedIn audience.
Absolutely. So we're getting ready to wrap up here. But I do want to ask one more question, and this one will go to Chris. So Chris, for someone who is an introvert, who has not posted before, and they're nervous about putting content out there, but they're passionate about establishing a brand, what would you quickly tell that person to get them started?
Focus on something you either love that you want to talk about or have passion. And I think one of the easy ways to start is commenting thoughtfully on posts related to those things, and then choosing what to share with a few of your own thoughts. But pick something you are really, really passionate about and something you really, really love and that you know about, because then it's easier to speak about that without AI having to say it all for you. And so I think that you start with comments, you post with thoughts, and then from there you start sharing more, but pick something you absolutely care about and start there.
Excellent. So I'm going to wrap up this section by basically saying, look, guys, it's also not about what you post. It's how you contribute to others' posts, right? If you have a colleague who got their master's degree, comment and say, hey, congratulations. I know that was a major accomplishment in your life. If someone gets promoted, comment versus just a thumbs up that people tend to give. And building your social media presence is not just about receiving and putting, trying to always comment on things, but it's also about celebrating those who are in your network, because then they become more valuable colleagues and contributors. So therefore, they will also pour back into you when you reach your accomplishments. And that is really the power of the network, is not reaching out and trying to establish a network when you need a job. You don't do it when you're trying to get something. You build that network so that when you do have to ask for something or you need support in something, you've already built that reliable network. So guys, we're going to wrap up. So first off, thank you guys so much for your content. It's amazing how quickly an hour. But I do want to wrap up and give everybody a chance to give one last sentence about establishing your personal brand that you want folks to take away from. I'm going to start from the top of my screen, which is Qiara. What's that one sentence there, Qiara?
Okay, so I would say your thoughts hold weight in the universe. Here's a book that I have. It's called It's All in Your Head. Go get it. It will help you reevaluate who you are. It's all in your head.
I love it. It is usually all in my head, especially the voices. Alejandra, what's your one sentence?
To me, if you're not actively shaping your narrative, someone else is definitely filling the gaps in for you. So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you consistently show up and be intentional about what you want people to experience when they experience you.
All right, cool. Sean.
Man, one of the things that I've seen comments in the feed about this is how scary it can be to step into the unknown. I lived it. I know how scary this whole process can be as an introvert stepping out. But the biggest lesson that I've learned is fear is a mile wide, but it's only an inch deep. The fear that you are feeling is the signal that you need to move through it. Surround yourself with excellence. Keep coming to events like this. Connect with people like this that truly want to support you and lift you up, and then move forward.
Thanks. And finally, Chris, talk to us.
Perception rules reality. And so be mindful of how you are perceived by others, and ultimately be intentional in your approach with how you interact with everyone, and start in real life before you go on social media, because that's the foundation before you can do anything else.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope folks in the community really found something beneficial from this masterclass. We're going to do it again. And I think there was one topic about public speaking and getting started in the public speaking arena that we didn't get to. So maybe that's our Q3 one. Maybe we'll come back and do that one. But if you like this, put a comment in the thread and tell us something that you found impactful, something that might have moved the needle for you guys. This actually helps us understand what the community wants so that we can continue to provide that. And look, folks, whether or not you take action, you still have a personal brand. The only question is, are you managing it, or are you letting the outside world manage it? Be on the lookout for our next masterclass sometime over the summer. We're going to see if I can convince everybody to come back. But look, folks, if you want to connect with me, you can follow me on LinkedIn as always. You can follow me on my YouTube channel or my Instagram channel, which I call HR After Dark. But anyway, you'll have to tune in to figure out what that's all about. But look, we're all here to support you, because that is what my friend in HR is about. So finally, on parting notes, I want to remind everybody, as always, to be well. Not just to others, but to yourself as well. And remember, as always, that your job is meant to support your life. Your life is not meant to support your job. We'll see you in a few months, my friends. Take care.